Am here at Pure Light Chiropractic in Bend, Oregon. And I'm so excited. Today I have someone very near and dear to me, Nicole. She is a nutritionist, and tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I am a holistic nutritionist. I
Mm.
got a master's in Portland from the National University of Natural Medicine a few years ago, and now I am practicing out of Fluid Strength here in Bend. I'm not in Bend currently, I'm in California visiting family, but
Yeah.
um, I have my own practice there, and I work with women currently really wanting to move into the postpartum, prenatal space. I just had a daughter 9 months ago, so really, really passionate about helping moms take the stress out of what to eat because it's hard
Mhm.
to eat enough, and then let alone eating really nutrient dense foods in that super important stage of life is can be difficult. So really passionate about just taking the guesswork out of that and really supporting moms in that stage. So yeah, really excited to be here and talk to you guys about one of my favorite topics, which is blood sugar. Super
Mhm.
powerful to take control of that with some really simple tips and tricks. So we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah. And you are such a gift. I don't know if I even told you. Dr. Sarah and I were talking like, oh my goodness, what we need is a blood sugar webinar. And then I happened to run into you and you're like, oh, I'm doing this thing now with strength on blood sugar. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like an answer to prayer. And
Yeah.
if you're friends, like 10 out of 10 recommend Fluid Strength. They are amazing. And then just having you in that space, I know is like next level. So, first, okay, so when I talk about blood sugar with friends, not a lot is really known about blood sugar. So, I kind of want to start and just ask and hear your opinion. Like, why is it so important, especially for women? Why would we focus on this?
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. I was just telling you before we started recording, thinking about just the broad question of what is the importance of blood sugar, kind of like what it does. And for me, I was kind of thinking about it, and really it's a nutrient delivery system, right? So we eat something, and the glucose that we get from that goes into our bloodstream, and then this whole cascade happens with hormones. Primarily cortisol and insulin help to keep our blood sugar really regulated and make sure that the sugar is getting out of the bloodstream essentially and into the cells to be used as energy. So that's actually insulin's primary role. It's made in the pancreas, and when we eat something, most foods have some amount of carbohydrates, but let's say we eat an apple, and that gets digested through our stomach and then gets into the bloodstream through the intestine. Insulin is like, okay, ding ding ding, it's my turn to do my thing.
I love
The
it. I want you to teach every class. This is
I'm like such a poor person too, and I'm
yeah.
visual, try and do that in words. But so it comes in and it picks up, if you imagine like a shuttle driver, like a bus, it picks up all the sugar and takes it where it needs to go and drops it off in the cells,
Mhm.
because the sugar needs to be really tightly regulated. So as soon as it hits the bloodstream, the insulin's going to shuttle it into the cells to be used as energy. um, so that's sort of the two main hormones. That's the importance
Yeah.
of blood sugar, kind of what it does. And then the other things that I like to talk about, and this doesn't just pertain to women, but I think inflammation, stress levels, and sleep are really heavily impacted by blood sugar. So doing what we can to maintain a balanced blood sugar is going to be really supportive for those systems. And if you're a mom, a new mom, doesn't matter, like those things are already really taxed, right?
Yeah.
Stress is higher typically, sleep is lower.
Yeah.
So, and some of that's just unavoidable. So, doing what we can food wise is really helpful and supportive for maintaining those. The other thing that I like to just to really get a good picture of like the insulin, the cortisol, what's happening when we eat is talk about the blood sugar roller coaster. So, some people might be kind of with this visual, but I like to compare a meal that supports blood sugar versus a meal that doesn't is like a roller coaster, like a crazy Six Flags roller coaster, if you're, what Six Flags in
Yep.
California, versus a kiddie coaster, right?
Mhm.
So let's say we're eating a donut. Okay, that's going to give us much higher spikes in our blood sugar, which is going to say ding, 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 really, really high insulin.
Yeah.
And then also going to drop it because the blood sugar spikes so fast and high that the insulin is doing what it needs to get it down, leaving us in this low blood sugar state. So the really low, low, big drop, right?
Mhm.
But the low, low isn't that great either because what happens there is cortisol comes to the rescue. If we don't eat right away, I should say. If we don't eat right away, then cortisol, it's like our survival mechanism, will release more sugar into the
Mhm.
blood to get it back up. So now we're having high blood sugar, high insulin, and high cortisol, which
Yeah.
is not super great and really inflammatory and really taxing to our adrenals as well. So we're not
Mhm.
only supporting blood sugar, but we're also affecting our adrenals, which is probably already, taxed by just life,
Yeah.
stress of all kinds
Especially
of,
if you're a new mama.
yeah,
Es
right? Yeah, yeah,
And it's tough too because it's like when you're holding a child and you're breastfeeding and you're needing to keep your blood sugar up because you're depleting so much. I
mm,
know it's really tough to keep that balance. I love that analogy of, like, the kiddie coaster.
yeah,
I'm
yep,
personally more of a fan of, honestly.
right? I know.
Um,
It's fun. The theme park, not so much for our body. Um,
yes, not so much.
and so
So yeah, go ahead.
that was pretty much the blood sugar. So high, like the insulin comes in to get it down. So think high blood sugar or insulin, sugar out, cortisol
Mhm.
in.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. That's super simple. Really, I mean, I'm, like, going back to, like, biochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really good synopsis. So what are some signs of, like, unstable or low blood sugar? I know you, like, kind of touched, but, what are some things to look for, like, SOS signs that throughout the day you're not maintaining a good balance?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people think blood sugar diabetes, but there's so
Yeah.
many things
Yes.
for that point that we can be aware of. That can happen, before that happens. So I have a whole list here. So things like weight gain or the
Mhm,
inability to lose weight,
mhm.
fatigue is huge,
Yeah.
irritability, trouble falling asleep. So just sleep disturbances in general. That can also be from like technology and blue light and things like that. But if you kind of remember the cortisol piece, if the cortisol is high because of the blood sugar and from stress of daily life, then
Yeah.
melatonin is suppressed. And so we're going to have lots of trouble with sleep. Um, Waking up in the middle of the night, just low energy, the need
Mhm.
for noon kind of pick me up, whether it's coffee or a treat or whatever. Lots and lots of cravings. So this is a big one that I'm going to actually talk about in the workshop that I'm doing at Fluid Strength because I think cravings are misunderstood. A lot of people think that it's willpower and it's really not. It's your biology.
Mhm.
I was thinking about this in bed this morning. Biology will always win because it wants to keep you alive. So
Yeah.
craving, brain fog is another one. And those are, just some of them. I'm sure there's others, but those are some of the big ones. I would say cravings is like one that people can recognize.
Mhm. Mhm.
A big sign of blood sugar instability.
Yeah. Yeah. For
For sure.
sure, and I agree. I love that you said, like, biology always wins because I think even as a woman, like, in society, it's tough to, gosh, be like, "Oh, I'm getting it all right," right?
Mhm.
You, like, give into the cravings and there's this guilt or, like,
Mhm.
this yeah, so I like that you're, like, taking it out of perspective and being like, "No, there's a reason for this."
Totally. And that's actually
So cool.
one of my recommendations for like food solutions for stabilization is eat like if you're going to eat something, enjoy it because your mindset has so much to do with how you digest, how your
Yeah.
body processes. Also, like you were saying, the guilt and the shame that is around, oh, I shouldn't have had that, like it's
Yeah.
not good for me. Like that will continue to perpetuate the cycle. So just
Yes.
finding peace with that and being able to move on will do wonders with, you
Yeah.
choose a different, a different thing that might be more nourishing for your next meal. I always tell people each meal is a new time to start over. Like yes,
Yeah.
but like there's always the next meal,
Yeah.
to choose. So,
I love that too, because you can't be perfect and you
no.
can just get a little bit better every time, I
Yep,
think.
for sure.
Um, okay, so I wish, oh, I feel like you could talk about this for hours and hours. And I do want to say, Nicole does have a handout that we're going to upload. So look in the comments too, so you can kind of like follow along. We'll upload it after this webinar. But tell me some of the best foods for stabilization, or what are the best recommendations you make to like start your day off well and then
Mm,
like throughout the day able to like keep that balance?
yeah. So, first and foremost, eating enough food.
Mm, it's a big one.
Yes. Um, I am like the least restrictive nutritionist you're ever going to talk to. So, don't come to me if you want like a specific on me to tell you what to cut out, because most of the time people come to me and they're already really restrictive because
Mm,
they have, they're having a reaction or whatever, but I always
yeah,
like to dig for why are you having that reaction? That's just,
yeah,
an example of why, it's deeper usually, and why restricting foods isn't always the answer. So eating enough is huge. And I know a lot of people, especially I'm sure your people at Pure Light, my people, right, are like, what? You can eat whatever you want as long as you eat enough. Like, yes and no at the end of the day. Eating enough food, even if it's not the best food, is take your body out of that fight. I'm in starvation mode. And if you're a new mom, you know what I'm talking about. Like for me, it is, and I'm a nutritionist. I like really try and do my, prep work ahead of time, but some days it's just hard to eat enough. Like the baby's crying, the baby do whatever, like you're feeding the baby, you forget to feed yourself.
yeah,
And so sometimes I just need to grab something, whether it's, a bar or like, I don't know, a piece of toast, right? I'm just trying to think of like examples that maybe wouldn't be like typical,
mm,
nutrient dense food. And that's okay. That's okay to do that sometimes. I would rather have somebody that's maybe not eating enough eat those things than not eat at all. Because
mm,
if you're not eating enough, there's nothing else. It's hard. You're going to reach a ceiling, essentially, as far as like healing goes, right? Because your body doesn't have the energy, the nutrients to
right.
do, and it's in fight or flight, right? And you guys know about the nervous system, and we want to try and get people out of that as much as we can. So, um, that would be the first thing, is make sure that you're eating enough. And so to do that, a general rule of thumb I usually give is about every 3 to 4 hours, and also an hour of waking. So to kind of answer your question,
Mm-hmm.
we set ourselves up first thing in the morning. If you're going to make one change, try and prep your breakfast ahead of time. So I love having a frittata, or we'll do, I'll make like just a sheet tray of like eggs and cut it up into little squares for like breakfast sandwiches, or I'll make a big batch of scrambled eggs for breakfast burritos. So I'm an egg girl, but
Yeah.
if you're, there's lots of options, but I try and keep breakfast prepped so that I can get up, put Cora down, with her bottle or whatever, with toys, and make sure that I eat, within the first hour. And that is going to set your blood sugar up, for success.
Mhm. What
So that,
happens if you go beyond that hour? So there's a lot of people that are like, "Oh, I'm not hungry in the morning."
mm, yeah. So I'm glad you asked that. I was waiting for like the intermittent fasting question too, because
Yes. Yep.
do that a lot. So if you wait, what happens is your blood sugar is going to, yes, we have reserves, right? And people are gonna be like, oh, well, I do ketogenic diet, my body's using the fat. Yes, there's always caps, right? But in general, for most people, you're fasting all night. So if people want to fast, get lots of sleep because
Yeah,
you'll be this long
I
fast.
can get on board with that. I love that recommendation. I'm in.
Yeah. So get lots of sleep, do your fast, and then Don't wait too long to eat because then your blood sugar is going to get low and that cortisol is going to release sugar into the bloodstream. So again, thinking about how do we minimize cortisol? How do we get ourselves out of fight or flight? That's going to be one of them, is not going too long.
Mm-hmm.
Low blood sugar state. The not hungry piece, this one's really hard because a lot of people, especially women, experience this. If you're not hungry, if it's for only an hour, it's probably okay. But if you're not hungry for a few hours, then it could be a sign that your metabolism is a little bit off. It could be a sign that your body's running on cortisol, because that essentially, when you're intermittent fasting, when you're on a ketogenic diet, yes, you feel really good, but it's because you're running on cortisol.
Yeah.
So, yes, you feel good for a while, but not forever. I don't think that those are super sustainable, especially for women and their hormones. So, I
Yeah.
know there's a lot of research on intermittent fasting, but most of it's for men, not for women. So, that would be my
There's
answer.
very little for women, I think. And I've read some books, and I know there's certain times in your cycle, which is just a totally different webinar in general.
Yeah.
Um, and women's hormones are so unique.
Hmm.
I think it's important. Like, I honestly didn't realize the blood sugar, how important that was to
Mm.
so many things. Like you said, like sleep and healing. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And I think honestly it's the first place to start in a
Hmm.
healing journey, because you can't heal without that stabilization. Because exactly like you keep reiterating, like the high cortisol levels and your body's literally in starvation. Like, of course it's not focused on healing. Of course it's not. It's like I don't know when I'm going to get fed again, and I'm
Yep.
going to make sure I like stay that way.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
So all of our resources are going to be allocated differently versus if our body was nice and nourished.
yeah,
So, yeah.
totally. And I think women, some of the podcasts and books I've been reading, it's exactly like you said. The first thing is women aren't eating enough, because
Hmm.
we've been told throughout the 90s and early 2000s, count those calories, and that's just not true.
Yeah. It's just not. I think, and I would hope most people are starting to get on board with that, but
Mm.
yeah, surprise. It's still, even though people know that, it's hard for them to actually do it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
because the, the,
the stigma. So what are
yes.
your other like favorite foods to help keep a stable blood sugar?
Yeah.
Obviously, I feel like donuts are once in a while.
Yes. I actually I do have a tip for when you are going
Okay.
to eat that, if you can get around to it. I know for me this has been tricky even for myself to start implementing, but I don't know if you're familiar with her name is the Glucose Goddess on Instagram, but
No.
if you followed her and you're interested in blood sugar, the biochemist, I think.
Sweet. Love
Science. Yeah, and she has a podcast and a book and huge following on Instagram, lots of really awesome content that's super digestible about blood sugar. And
it.
basically, she'll do all these breakdowns of graphs of eating, let's say, a mango by itself, what your blood sugar does,
Mhm.
go with protein, let's say, like an avocado or something, or a beef stick. And the how crazy it is at how good it is at modulating that response.
Mhm.
My favorite thing, another analogy coming at you, is blood sugar bumpers. So making sure that you're eating fat and protein with your meals is going to, like bowling. It's like the bumpers. When you go bowling, it's going to help to keep that blood sugar or the bowling ball in the lane so that it doesn't go too high or too low when you're
Yeah.
eating that. Um, so just like a floodgates open and sugar rushing in versus like a small leak. If
Mm.
you have fat and protein in your meal, it's going to be more of that small leak
Yeah.
bloodstream. So, fat and protein, if you have to just pick one, because fat a lot of times is built into our protein, especially if you're eating animal proteins or you're putting butter on something, veggies or whatever. So,
Yeah.
focusing on getting that protein in will be really supportive for it balanced. Eating within an hour of waking, I talked about eating every 3 to 4 hours, avoiding caffeine on an empty stomach. Um,
Mm.
really important for preventing that cortisol spike,
Yeah.
especially if you're first thing in the morning, you're having a cup of coffee with no food, and then you're waiting,
Yeah.
to eat. That's just like blood sugar dysregulation. uh,
Totally.
finest. So trying to have a little something and then having your caffeine will serve you a lot better. Obviously minimizing added, sugars and processed foods will be really helpful. And then I talked about that mindset. If you are going to enjoy something, enjoy it and then move on. You
Yeah,
know, some butter at your next meal.
totally.
Yeah.
And I love how you include that too, because it's true. If you're stressed about what you're eating, your cortisol levels, and it will affect you because you're stressed about it. And that's something I didn't realize until I was in Cairo school. And I can't remember, somebody talked about like the power of the mind.
Yeah.
And so honestly had my own struggle with like, okay, am I allowed to eat this
Mm,
sugary treat? And
yep.
instead, I'm like, okay, I'm choosing to have this. And I'm like, I will almost audibly say, like, this will like nourish my body. I'm choosing this for like nourishment. And then I really enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah.
And I like to do that for every meal too, like a celebration of giving my body energy. Um,
Mm, I
and
love
it tastes,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So kind of like prayers and gratefulness and like being able to see everything I'm eating and
Hmm.
knowing kind of just like making that connection between my body and my mind and my food
Right.
in a positive way because it takes a long time to retrain the brain.
Mm,
It honestly took me years of like, yes, I want that cupcake and it's okay.
yes.
And
100%. It's hard to get rid of that guilt and shame around food. The people's relationship with food is one of the one of the main things that we work on when you work on with
mm,
when you work with me one on one, because most of the
yeah,
time the people I see are already doing all the things, and so for me it's validation, it's permission that we work on. It's maybe a few little tweaks here and there, but most of the time it's like the mindset around food, and that is the most powerful, honestly, in my opinion.
yeah,
And to just for saying like I'm choosing this even though it's a cupcake for nourishment, it's nourishing you in a different way.
yeah.
And I was listening to a podcast by the Glucose Goddess, and she come on the podcast and she said she was feeling a little low and just needed a bit of like her mood was low, not her energy, and she ate a
Mm,
Snickers, talking about how people confuse sugar for energy, but it's really dopamine that
mm,
sugar gives. So knowing that, I was like, oh, this is cool. Now when I'm feeling like my mood is low, not my energy, but my
yeah,
mood, and leverage that as a tool and use it as a tool for nourishing my mind.
I love
So
it.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's
And
amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
gosh, I wish these were like an hour long. Anything else that you want to share? This was like so quick. And will you also share details about your coming up, your like in person event at Fluid? Is it open to the public?
yeah. So I have one though, just one more short little tip. If
Okay.
you to minimize the impact of, let's say, a cupcake or a donut on your blood sugar, you can
Mhm.
add a teaspoon of vinegar. It can be any vinegar, just not like the balsamic glaze, to a
Yeah.
big glass of water. Not only is it going to help your stomach acid so you digest the food, but
Mhm.
it can slow down a blood sugar spike by up to 30%, which is really crazy. So, you know,
Before or after?
before, if you
Okay.
can, like minutes prior. Apparently, the acetic acid in the vinegar helps to do that. So I just
Okay.
learned that.
That's
But
awesome. Yeah, I
yeah,
can do that.
yeah, bitters or apple cider vinegar will work. But
Sure.
so my in-person workshop at Fluid Strength, if you guys aren't familiar, it's like off of Revere and Fourth, but you can look it
Mhm.
up. That's where my office is. There's a gym in there that I use to do workshops, and so I'm going to do a blood sugar workshop, and we're going to really dive into cravings. We'll talk,
Mhm.
about talked about today, but it's in person, which is really fun to get to connect with people in person, face to
And it's
face.
a great community there too, and that's where your office is as well. I
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you work with me one on one, that's where you'll come too. So,
Yay.
um, yeah, and then I think you're going to post my website in there. That's where you guys can get in contact with me. I
Yeah.
also try to be active-ish on Instagram, so you can follow me at Well Oiled Nutrition. And I think that's it.
I love it. I do love your Instagram. I feel like you always post recipes. I remember the first time because when I first met you, we worked out together like almost 2 years ago.
No, you
And I
feel
was like, how is this like it was like a 5:30, 6 o'clock class. And I'm like, how is somebody this nice at 6 a.m.? And
told
then
me
I
I don't remember that, but that's
yeah,
nice.
yeah. I mean, it was like a 6 a.m. class. And then like seeing you on Fluid Strengths Instagram and all the tips you share, I think it's just so valuable. And how easy you make all of your stuff. I'm like, there's so many days that I've been like, okay, I can do that. That's
Oh,
great.
good.
So
That's my goal. My like tagline is simple nutrition for complex humans because
yeah,
we are complex, but our eating shouldn't have to be. And this
yeah.
crazy world makes it seem like that, and it's really not. So why are we the only? I'm sure you've heard this. Why are we the only species that doesn't know what to eat?
I haven't heard that.
Well, they don't have any. They just intuitively know, and I think our environment takes
Mm,
that. So giving that back to people is my goal. So
yeah, it's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing
yes,
your heart and your all of your knowledge with us. And yeah, I put your website in there, and I'll add, if I can, I'll add that PDF that you sent me.
okay.
Um,
I
and yeah,
give you the link for the workshop too if people want to
oh,
go.
cool. Yeah, that would be great. I'll add it onto our Facebook.
Cool.
All right. Well, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for joining us. As always, feel free to reach out to myself or directly to Nicole. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you soon.